Everything you think you know about Aztec drinking culture is wrong. Those images of lively taverns where warriors and commoners shared drinks and stories, complete fiction. The reality was far more controlled, ritualistic, and frankly, pretty brutal. Here's what actually happened. The drink itself, as disgusting as it sounds. Let's start with the drink itself, because pulque was nothing like what you'd order at a bar today. Imagine walking into your local brewery and asking for their special. The bartender hands you a milky white liquid that has the consistency of, and I'm being completely serious here, mucus. Yeah, we're talking slimy, really slimy. Some Spanish conquistadors compared its texture to spit. Others said mucus. And before you think I'm exaggerating, modern drinkers say the same thing. This isn't some lost in translation situation. The smell? Oh, it gets better. Think sour milk mixed with yeast in a musty basement. If that sounds appealing to you, then you might want to check yourself. The taste matched the texture and smell perfectly. Slightly acidic with this weird musty tang that was definitely, and I mean definitely, an acquired taste. Like if kombucha and spoiled yogurt had a baby. And despite all that sensory assault, the alcohol content was pathetic, between 2 and 7%. Your average Bud Light is stronger than most batches of pulque. But wait, there's more. It would spoil fast, which meant the potency was a total gamble. One batch might barely buzz you, the next might lay you out. Russian roulette in a cup, except instead of a gun, it's fermented cactus juice that smells like gym socks. Why drink it? God's nutrition and divine blood. So, why did the Aztecs drink this stuff at all? Well, buckle up, because it wasn't for the flavor profile. Pulque was packed with nutrition. We're talking carbohydrates, vitamin C and B complex, amino acids, minerals like iron and phosphorus. There was literally a saying that it was only shy of being meat. In a society without McDonald's or protein shakes, this slimy mess was actually keeping people alive. More importantly, and this is where it gets wild, pulque was considered a literal gift from the gods. The goddess Mayahuil, according to Aztec mythology, had her blood transform into the sweet aguamiel sap that fermented into pulque. So every time you took a sip, you were basically drinking divine blood. No pressure or anything. The production process, decades in the making. Making pulque was its own whole production. The maguey plant, which looks like a giant aloe vera on steroids, takes anywhere from 7 to 25 years to mature. That's longer than it takes to pay off most car loans. When it was finally ready, specialized harvesters called chalachaqueros would scrape out the core to collect the aguamiel sap. This sap would ferment in vats for days, and the whole process was wrapped up in religious observances and agricultural cycles. Here's where it gets really weird. The brewers making this stuff had to abstain from sex while brewing. Completely serious. They believed that if the brewer got busy, the batch would go sour. Imagine telling your boss at the craft brewery that you need to practice celibacy for the IPA to turn out right. You'd be laughed out of the building. But for the Aztecs, totally normal. Everything about this drink screamed purity and balance, which is ironic considering it looked and smelled like something you'd find in a dumpster. The laws, death penalty for drunkenness. Now here's where things go from weird to absolutely insane. The Aztecs had incredibly strict laws about drinking alcohol. When I say strict, I don't mean your mom giving you the silent treatment. I mean death penalty strict. Public drunkenness could literally get you executed. We're not talking about a DUI or community service. We're talking about getting beaten to death in the town square while children watched. The Empire saw drunkenness as basically the root of all evil. Adultery? Blame alcohol. Theft? Alcohol. Riots? Alcohol. Rebellions? You guessed it, alcohol. They took this more seriously than the TSA takes a bottle of shampoo. The fifth pulque, the devil's cup. There was this concept called the fifth pulque, and it's honestly genius in a terrifying way. You could drink up to 4 cups at any gathering. 4 was fine. 4 was safe. 4 kept you within the bounds of acceptable society. That 5th cup, that was the devil's cup. It was believed that if you had that 5th cup, you were absolutely 100% guaranteed to lose your balance and face punishment. It's like if drinking games had actual lethal consequences. Beer pong, but make it a war crime. Punishments, worse than you can imagine. The punishments for breaking these laws would make modern cancer culture look like a friendly suggestion. If you were caught drunk in public and you weren't nobility, you faced execution. The methods included beating, strangulation, or stoning, and get this, they'd often do these executions in front of young people as a warning. Imagine scared straight, but instead of showing you prison, they just execute someone right there. Don't drink, kids, or you'll end up like Steve over here. Yikes! The punishment actually depended on your social class and whether it was your first rodeo. Common people caught drunk the first time, they'd shave your head in public, and before you think that's not so bad, remember this was a society where your appearance directly correlated to your honor and status. Getting your head shaved was like getting canceled on Twitter, losing your job, and having your driver's license revoked all at once. Second offense, death. No appeals, no lawyer, just done. Nobles got slightly better treatment because of course they did. They'd be strangled privately to preserve their dignity, so you still died, but at least nobody had to watch. It's like getting fired over Zoom instead of in the conference room. Still sucks, you're still unemployed, but hey, privacy. Even priests and government officials could face execution or lose their positions. Nobody was safe from the Pulque police. 3 exceptions: old, pregnant, or about to die. There were exactly 3 exceptions to these rules, and they were narrower than your chances of winning the lottery. If you were over 70 years old, congratulations, you earned the right to get absolutely hammered. The thinking was you'd already raised your family, done your work, paid your dues. You could drink yourself into oblivion if you wanted. But, and this is important, even elderly drunks weren't left to wander around. Children would literally escort them everywhere to make sure they didn't fall into rivers or off cliffs. Imagine being the designated driver for your drunk grandpa, except you're 8 years old and there are no cars. Pregnant women could have small amounts for nutritional benefits. Sacrificial victims got pulque before rituals to numb the pain of, being sacrificed. So your options were basically be old, be pregnant, or be about to die. Those were your 3 tickets to drinking legally. During certain holidays, there was slightly more wiggle room. Child naming ceremonies might involve serving pulque in calabashes until guests started singing and joking, but even then, the whole community was watching like hawks. Every single person at the party was basically a narc. There was no such thing as cutting loose. You couldn't even get tipsy without someone's aunt keeping a running tally of your cups. No taverns. Seriously, none. And here's the kicker. The Aztecs didn't have taverns at all. Zero. Zilch. Nada. No bars, no pubs, no Applebee's equivalent where you could grab happy hour margaritas. Drinking happened at homes, temples, or at festival grounds. It was always tied to specific rituals or required permission from someone important. Think about that. An entire civilization with alcohol but no sports bars. No place to watch the big game and pound a few cold ones. The Super Bowl would have been a very different experience. After the Spanish showed up and ruined everything, pulque became more accessible. By the early 20th century, Mexico City had over 1,000 pulquerias, actual bars. But in Aztec times, you couldn't even find one. Social class, who could drink and when? Social class determined literally everything about who could drink and when. Aztec society made our modern wealth gap look egalitarian. At the top, you had the Tlatoani, big boss. Then nobility, priest, warriors, merchants called Pocteca, common people, and at the very bottom, slaves. Pulque was primarily for the elite crowd. Priests drank it to get into the zone for ceremonies. Nobles could drink after victories, presumably while the common people watched and seethed. Warriors got access during specific ceremonies. Regular folks, mostly excluded. You could be at a festival, see other people drinking, and know that if you touched a drop without permission, you were risking your life. If a commoner tried to drink unauthorized, they could be executed. Imagine going to a party where half the people are drinking and the other half knows they'll be killed if they pick up a cup. That's not a party, that's psychological torture. Take the 2 Rabbit Day Festival. Merchants would sponsor these elaborate events with beautifully decorated vessels, games, flowing pulque. You could only participate if you had the right social rank. It's like if Vegas had casinos, but they checked your tax returns at the door and executed you if you were middle class. Pregnant women and sick people might get pulque medicinally, but farmers and laborers, the people actually growing the food and building the pyramids, barred, totally banned. The people doing the real work couldn't partake while the people at the top lived it up. The breakdown, drinking rights by class. Let me break down exactly how this worked because it's genuinely insane. Nobles and priests could drink regularly, but only in rituals and after victories. They were supervised, limited to 4 cups, and used pulque for sacred offerings. If they messed up, private execution by strangulation. Warriors drank occasionally after battles or during sacrificial ceremonies, always with state approval. If they violated the rules, public beating or stoning. Elders over 70 could drink unlimited amounts, even to blackout drunk levels, but they needed kid escorts to keep them from doing something stupid. Common people almost never got access. First offense for unauthorized drinking, public head shaving, and humiliation. Second offense, execution. Merchants could drink during specific guild gatherings and trade banquets, but they faced the same harsh punishments as regular people if they stepped out of line. Slaves and young people, forget it. Completely prohibited except in the rarest ritual circumstances. Any violation meant immediate death penalty. This wasn't a system designed to bring people together. This was designed to remind everyone exactly where they stood on the social ladder. It's like if your company had an open bar at the holiday party, but only the C-suite executives were allowed to drink, and everyone else got fired for looking at the bottles too long. Gatherings as information hubs. But these gatherings did serve another purpose. It's actually kind of fascinating. They were information hubs, though not in the cool spy movie way you're imagining. During festivals like Huacholi or Tequili Tontli, pulque would flow alongside dancing and feasting. These were opportunities for elites to network, gossip, share news, basically LinkedIn but with more human sacrifices. The merchant spies, James Bond and a Loincloth. The Pulqueteca merchants were the real MVPs here. These guys weren't just traders hauling jade and feathers around Mesoamerica. They were professional spies for the Empire. James Bond in a loincloth. They travel to rival kingdoms, gather luxury goods, and oh, by the way, also collect intelligence on military strength, resources, and political drama. Then they'd report everything back to the Emperor. Some would even disguise themselves to infiltrate communities, which is honestly impressive dedication to the job. Banquet settings where pulque flowed gave them perfect opportunities to eavesdrop or form alliances. Merchant guilds would host these events that doubled as strategy sessions. Got a few drinks in someone and suddenly they're talking about troop movements or resource shortages. It's like corporate espionage, except the corporate office is a temple and the PowerPoint presentation involves ritual bloodletting. But, and this is crucial, everything was still under state supervision. Priests watched everything. Guards were present. Excess got punished immediately. These weren't some underground speakeasy where rebels plotted revolutions. This was the ancient equivalent of your boss hosting team drinks, but also recording everything you say for HR purposes. Not exactly conducive to speaking freely. State control and rituals. Even agricultural ceremonies where pulque blessed crops and community leaders shared information had constant state oversight. There were cautionary tales to keep people in line. The myth of Quetzalcoatl's drunken exile was well known. He was basically a god, got too drunk, messed up badly, and had to leave in shame. The message was crystal clear. The literal god couldn't handle his liquor. What chance did you have? Intoxication led to ruin, not empowerment. The rituals themselves were state-orchestrated performances of control. Pulque induced altered states that the Aztecs valued for accessing the divine, sort of like ancient ayahuasca ceremonies, but with worse-tasting beverages. But these states were only acceptable within strict boundaries. In ceremonies, pulque was offered to gods through elaborate vessels in straw tubes. Participants would drink under constant supervision. The 400 rabbits, chaos personified. There was this concept of the Sensan Totokching, the 400 rabbits. And no, that's not a cute story about bunnies. These represented all the different effects of drunkenness, from joy to violence to everything in between. Symbolized the chaos that the state was desperately trying to control. It's like if the government created a mascot for all the ways alcohol could ruin your life and then use it to justify their insane policies. Festival breakdown, controlled celebrations. Festivals like Panquetzalitzli allowed more people to access pulque, but the supervision never stopped. The goal was preventing disorder at all costs. You had this controlled atmosphere with sour smells mixing with ritual chants, people choking down slimy drinks during solemn religious moments. Compare that to any American college or Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras and you'll see the difference. Different festivals had different vibes, but the same strict energy. Huacholi, the hunting festival, had dancing, food, and vats of pulque. but everything was measured. Tequilitantli was the salt merchant's feast where workers could supposedly drink to exhaustion. It sounds fun until you remember it was basically the one day they got to blow off steam before going back to brutal labor conditions. It's like if Amazon gave warehouse workers one pizza party a year and called it worker appreciation. The Two-Rabbit Day involved games and flowing drinks sponsored by wealthy merchants. Priests and merchants and elders would honor the Pulque gods while having carefully monitored political discussions. Panquetzalitzli celebrated a war god's birth and gave broader access across social classes, but state officials supervised everything. The goal was reinforcing loyalty through controlled intoxication. It's propaganda with a buzz. Child rites during certain festivals involved small vessels for kids and let elders drink more freely. These events socialize young people into the rules. Start them early, show them what happens if they step out of line. It's like DARE, except instead of a police officer showing you drugs, it's your entire civilization showing you state-sanctioned terror. Spanish Chronicles documented horror. Spanish chroniclers who showed up after the conquest documented all this with a mix of horror and fascination. Bernardino de Sahagun's writings described the Aztec disdain for drunkards, depicting them as disheveled disasters destined for ruin. Some people were even believed to be fated to alcoholism by their birth signs. Born on Two-Rabbit? Congrats, the universe decided you're going to struggle with substance abuse. Not a personal failing, just cosmic bad luck. Imagine if astrology actually determined your addiction risk. Tinder bios would be very different. Why no taverns existed? The fact that dedicated pulque houses didn't exist in Aztec times matters. Those only appeared during the colonial period when Spanish introduced pulquerias with their own weird rules like no doors or music. Before that, the closest thing was tentacles, fermentation sheds on haciendas or temple areas. Those were functional industrial spaces. Not fun, not social, just business. Hollywood versus reality. Most romanticized ideas about Aztec drinking come from colonial exaggerations or modern movies that needed to make ancient civilizations look more relatable. Hollywood loves a good tavern scene. Reality, way less cinematic, way more authoritarian. Alcohol was a tool of power and control. Elites used it for status. The state used it to enforce obedience. Rituals used it to channel dangerous altered states into controlled religious experiences. Any conspiracies that happened were state-sanctioned, like the merchant spy network, not rebellious plots in dark corners. The diversity of people at gatherings seems impressive until you realize everyone was filtered through rigid class restrictions. A farmer might attend a harvest blessing, but he wasn't equal to the nobles there. He couldn't drink as much, couldn't speak freely, couldn't challenge anyone. The appearance of inclusion masked hardcore hierarchy. A civilization terrified of losing control. This whole system showed a civilization terrified of losing control. The Aztecs genuinely believed drunkenness could unravel everything they built. Imperial addresses compared intoxication to destructive storms sweeping through society. The 5-cup limit, the public executions, the kid escorts for drunk grandpas, it all pointed to deep cultural anxiety about what happens when people lose inhibitions. Even pulque's physical properties reinforced this. The sour smell and slimy texture reminded everyone this wasn't fun. Its nutritional value made it practical. Its connection to gods made it sacred, but its power to intoxicate made it dangerous, something requiring extreme caution. It's like if vegetables could get you drunk, but also might get you executed. Eat your broccoli, but not too much or the state will end you. Birth signs tied to alcoholism show how deep this fear went. It wasn't about personal weaknesses. The cosmos itself could doom you to struggle with alcohol, and that cosmic curse needed management through brutal social controls. The production process, requiring brewer celibacy, reflected similar obsession with purity. Any contamination, spiritual or physical, could ruin everything. The 7 to 25 years required for maguey plants to mature meant pulque production couldn't be rushed. Every step was deliberate, crafted in tradition and meaning. Compare that to modern beer brewing, which can be done in weeks, or moonshine, which can be ready in days. The Aztecs were playing the long game with every aspect of this drink. Understanding this context makes their approach make sense, sort of. They weren't just being controlling for fun. They genuinely believed uncontrolled intoxication threatened their entire civilization. Their empire ran on order, everyone knowing their place and staying there. Drunkenness disrupted everything, made people unpredictable, broke down class barriers. That's why punishments were medieval and exceptions were minimal. The real truth about Aztec taverns. So, when you look back at Aztec drinking culture, throw out everything you think you know from movies or video games. The Aztecs didn't have taverns or social spaces. For them, pulque was sacred, nutritional, medicinal, always controlled. It was for reaching gods, not bonding with neighbors. It marked status, not friendship, and it came with constant threat of severe punishment. Reality was gritty everywhere you looked. The drink was gritty, literally slimy and sour. The atmosphere was gritty, solemn and supervised. Social dynamics were gritty, reinforcing who was above and who was below. And consequences were as gritty as possible. Public executions designed to terrorize people into compliance. You couldn't relax with a cold one after work. Every sip was weighed, every cup counted, every buzz scrutinized by those in power. That's the truth behind Aztec taverns. They didn't exist. What existed was a control system wrapped in religious justification where the drink was sacred, laws were brutal, and one mistake could end your life.